Captain Vex-Morak of the Galactic Assessment Division had seen many species attempt the Trial of Keth-Vranis. The towering mountain on planet Zerion 7 stood as the ultimate test of physical prowess, mental fortitude, and sheer stubborn determination. For over 3,000 cycles, no being had successfully reached its summit. Not the 8-armed Krellian warriors with their natural climbing advantages. Not the telepathic Mindari who could sense danger before it struck. Not even the cybernetically enhanced Technoborgs with their built-in oxygen recyclers. But somehow the Galactic Council had decided that humans, these soft, pink creatures from the third planet of Sol System, deserved their chance. Captain Vex-Morak's 4 eyes rolled in synchronized annoyance as he reviewed the file on his crystalline display pad. Species Homo sapiens. Average height 1.7 meters. Natural armor none. Enhanced abilities none detected. Survival rating in hostile environments marginal. He clicked his mandibles together in what passed for laughter among his kind. This should be amusing, he muttered to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Zorbthek. The transport shuttle descended through Zerion 7's atmosphere, carrying their human test subjects. Vex-Morak had expected a delegation of their finest specimens, perhaps military personnel or professional athletes. Instead, the manifest showed an eclectic group, a librarian named Maya Peterson, a street musician called Jake Rivers, an accountant named Tom Bradley, and most surprisingly, a 19-year-old college student named Emma Cross. Captain Zorbthek's voice carried a note of concern. The atmospheric readings show increasing storm activity near the mountain's base. Perhaps we should postpone the trial. Vex-Morak waved a dismissive tentacle. Nonsense. If these humans are truly worthy of galactic membership, a little weather should not deter them. Besides, failure is the expected outcome anyway. The shuttle touched down at Base Camp Alpha, a sprawling facility carved into the rocky plateau at the mountain's foot. The humans disembarked, looking around with expressions that Vex-Morak's translation software labeled as wonder and nervous excitement. How quaint. Maya Peterson, the librarian, approached first. She was a compact woman with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes. Captain Vex-Morak, I presume. Thank you for this opportunity. The captain's translator struggled with human social niceties. Why were they thanking him for what would likely be their doom? Indeed, you have read the briefing materials regarding the Trial of Keth-Vranis. Thoroughly, Maya replied with a smile. 17 different climate zones, oxygen levels dropping to 12% at altitude, unstable weather patterns, and approximately 43 documented ways to die before reaching the halfway point. Jake Rivers, whose human musical instruments jangled as he walked, grinned widely. Sounds like Tuesday night in downtown Detroit. Vex-Morak's translator flagged this as human humor, reference unclear. He decided to ignore it. Emma Cross stood slightly apart from the group, studying the mountain through the transparent aluminum of the observation deck. She was smaller than the others, with short auburn hair and an intensity in her green eyes that made Vex-Morak's skin crawl with unease. Something about her reminded him of the predatory Vash hunters from Kepler 442 billion, the way they would stand motionless before striking. But, young human, he addressed her directly. Are you certain you wish to attempt this trial? The mortality statistics for your age group are particularly unfavorable. Emma turned those unsettling green eyes toward him. Captain, with respect, I've spent the last 4 years rock climbing in the Rockies during my summers off. I've summited 14 peaks over 4,000 meters. The only difference here is that this one might actually be challenging. The audacity. Vex-Morak's gill slits fluttered with indignation. Challenging. Young female beings far superior to your species have perished on the lower slopes. The Thangorian Empire's finest warriors, equipped with environmental suits and hover assists, managed only 7 kilometers before hypothermia claimed them. Yeah, well, Emma shrugged. Maybe they didn't want it badly enough. Tom Bradley, the accountant, looked up from his tablet where he'd been reviewing what appeared to be statistical analyses. Actually, if you examine the historical data, most failures occur due to panic responses rather than physical limitations. The mortality rate spikes dramatically at the 3.7-kilometer mark, which coincidentally corresponds with the altitude where most species begin experiencing oxygen deprivation anxiety. Zorbthek leaned closer to his captain. "Sir, should we be concerned that their mathematician appears to have identified patterns our best analysts missed?" Vex-Morak ignored him. These humans would learn soon enough. The first day of preparation passed with standard equipment checks and route planning. The humans would carry their own supplies, navigate their own path, and receive no assistance once they began the ascent. Standard protocol dictated that the trial begin at dawn on the second day. That evening, as the alien observation team settled into their heated command bunker to monitor the humans' final preparations, Vex-Morak allowed himself a moment of professional satisfaction. By this time tomorrow he would file his report confirming humanity's unsuitability for galactic citizenship. Another primitive species properly categorized and dismissed. The morning arrived with a vengeance. Zerion 7's notorious weather patterns had generated a storm system that turned the sky the color of old blood. Ice particles larger than most beings' heads fell from clouds that seemed to stretch into the planet's upper atmosphere. "Captain," Zorbthek announced, "weather conditions are at critical levels. Surely even humans cannot be foolish enough to begin the trial in this." Through the bunker's observation windows, they watched the four humans checking their equipment with methodical precision. Maya Peterson tested her rope systems. Jake Rivers sealed his gear into weatherproof containers. Tom Bradley ran calculations on his tablet, occasionally glancing at the mountain through his protective goggles. And Emma Cross. Emma Cross simply stood facing the mountain, seemingly oblivious to the ice storm pelting her protective suit. "Attention, human test subjects," Vex-Morak announced through the communications array. "The current weather conditions exceed safe operational parameters. You are advised to delay commencement until atmospheric stability returns." Maya Peterson's voice crackled through the comm system. "Thank you for the advisory, Captain. We'll proceed as scheduled." Proceed as scheduled, through an ice storm that had grounded even their atmospheric craft. Vex-Morak felt the familiar sensation of his respiratory system seizing up, what humans might recognize as astonishment. "Sir," Zorbthek whispered, "they appear to be enjoying this." Indeed, Jake Rivers was actually laughing as he adjusted his pack straps. The sound carried clearly through the communication array, a sound of genuine amusement rather than the hysteria they typically observed in doomed test subjects. "Ladies and gentlemen," Emma Cross spoke for the first time since dawn, her voice cutting through the howling wind with startling clarity. "Let's go climb a mountain." And with that, the four humans simply began walking up the trail as if the apocalyptic weather was nothing more than a light spring rain. Vex-Morak activated all monitoring systems. The humans wore tracking devices, biomonitors, and emergency beacons. Multiple camera drones followed at a respectful distance, recording everything for the inevitable post-mortem analysis. In the command bunker, holographic displays showed their vital signs, location data, and equipment status. The first kilometer passed without incident, though this was hardly surprising. But the real challenges began at the transition zone, where Zerion 7's unique atmospheric properties started affecting most species' cognitive functions. The captain watched the displays with professional interest, waiting for the first signs of distress. Maya Peterson took point, her librarian training apparently including route navigation. She moved with steady efficiency, pausing regularly to consult maps and compass readings. Behind her, Tom Bradley maintained a consistent pace while continuously monitoring his tablet's environmental sensors. Jake Rivers followed, somehow managing to hum what the translator identified as human recreational music, despite the worsening conditions. And Emma Cross brought up the rear, moving with an economy of motion that Vex-Morak found oddly disturbing. Captain Zorbthek reported, "They've reached the 2-kilometer mark. All vitals remain stable." Storm intensity has increased by 40%. Through the drone feeds, they watched the humans navigate a section where previous test subjects had typically encountered their first serious difficulties. The path narrowed to barely 2 meters wide, with a vertical drop of several hundred meters on one side and unstable rock formations on the other. Ice accumulation made every step treacherous. Most species required specialized equipment and extreme caution to traverse this area. The humans simply walked across. Maya Peterson tested each foothold carefully but never hesitated. Tom Bradley actually seemed to be taking notes about rock composition. Jake Rivers continued his inexplicable humming, apparently unbothered by the fact that one misstep would send him plummeting into the abyss. And Emma Cross moved across the treacherous terrain like she was walking through a garden. "This is impossible," Vex-Morak muttered. "They should be showing signs of altitude sickness by now. It's disorientation at minimum. Sir, their bio readings indicate elevated heart rates consistent with physical exertion, but no signs of distress. If anything, their coordination appears to be improving." At the 3-kilometer mark, where Tom Bradley's analysis had identified the statistical failure point, the mountain presented its first serious challenge. A near-vertical rock face stretched upward for 200 meters, its surface covered in ice and loose stone. Previous expeditions had required advanced climbing gear, environmental suits, and multiple support teams to even attempt this section. Most had turned back. The humans paused at the base of the cliff, conferring among themselves. Through the communication array, their conversation was perfectly audible. Right then, Maya announced, unpacking climbing gear with practiced efficiency. "Emma, you're our best technical climber. Want to take lead?" Emma cross-examined the rock face with the methodical attention of a professional. "Looks straightforward enough. The ice formation actually provides decent anchor points if you know what to look for. Tom, can you calculate the safest route based on stress distribution?" The accountant was already working. Optimal path would be, yes there. Follow the natural fracture line up to that ledge, then traverse left to avoid the overhang. Should minimize exposure time. Jake Rivers secured his instruments and grinned. "Just like old times, Em. Remember that climb in Colorado where we got caught in a blizzard?" "That was fun," Emma replied, and Vex-Morak's translator couldn't determine if she was being sarcastic or sincere. With humans, apparently both were possible simultaneously. What followed challenged everything Vex-Morak thought he knew about species limitations. Emma Cross ascended the cliff face with fluid precision, setting anchor points and safety lines for the others. Maya Peterson followed with the steady competence of someone who had clearly done this before. Tom Bradley climbed while continuing to take environmental readings, apparently capable of complex calculations, even while dangling from a rope. And Jake Rivers. Jake Rivers somehow managed to carry his musical instruments up a near-vertical ice-covered cliff while maintaining what sounded like casual conversation. Captain Vex-Morak's voice carried a note of something the translator identified as concern. "They've reached the 4-kilometer mark. No species has ever progressed this far without significant equipment failures or medical emergencies. The storm had worsened, if such a thing was possible. Visibility had dropped to less than 10 meters. Ice formations created by the wind were large enough to crush most beings. The temperature had fallen below the survival threshold for most known life forms. The humans appeared to be having the time of their lives. This is completely within normal parameters for a winter climb," Emma's voice carried clearly through the communication array as she secured another anchor point. "Visibility is a bit limited, but the rock quality is actually quite good once you get above the loose surface layer." Normal parameters. Vex-Morak felt his gill slits flutter in distress. These conditions would kill most trained soldiers from the galaxy's finest military forces. "Maya, how are your energy reserves holding up?" Tom Bradley inquired, apparently conducting some sort of ongoing performance analysis of their group. "Feeling good, Tom. This reminds me of that hiking trip in Nepal. Remember, Jake, you complained about the altitude the entire time." "Hey, that was different," Jake protested good-naturedly. "That was before Emma got us all addicted to extreme altitude training. Now I practically need supplemental gravity to feel normal." They were joking. In the middle of a lethal storm, on a mountain that had claimed thousands of lives, at an altitude where most beings experienced cognitive impairment, these humans were making recreational conversation. "Sir," Zorbthek announced, "they've reached the 5-kilometer mark. This is unprecedented." At 5 kilometers, Keth-Vranis began to reveal its true nature. The mountain's unique geological composition created what scientists termed atmospheric anomalies. The oxygen levels fluctuated wildly. Gravity fields shifted without warning. Electromagnetic disturbances interfered with most technology. The humans adapted with disturbing ease. "Interesting," Tom Bradley commented as his tablet briefly malfunctioned. "Looks like we're dealing with magnetic field variations. Emma, adjust your compass readings by approximately 15 degrees east." "Already on it," Emma replied, consulting a mechanical compass that seemed unaffected by the electromagnetic chaos. "Maya, the GPS is going to be unreliable from here up. We're back to old-school navigation." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Maya responded cheerfully. As they approached the 6-kilometer mark, the mountain unleashed another of its deadly surprises. A section of the trail simply wasn't there anymore. What their pre-climb surveys had shown as a stable path had collapsed, leaving a gap nearly 20 meters wide over a drop that disappeared into the storm-darkened depths. Most expeditions would consider this an insurmountable obstacle. The humans regarded it as a puzzle to solve. "Right," Emma announced, studying the gap with professional interest. "Tom, what's the span on our longest rope?" 30 meters, plus the emergency backup at 25. "More than enough." "Maya, can you anchor on that outcrop?" "Jake, you're lightest, so you'll go first after I set the line." What followed was a display of problem-solving and teamwork that left Vex-Morak's analytical systems struggling to process. Emma cross-rigged a complex pulley system using nothing but standard climbing equipment. Maya Peterson provided anchor support with the calm competence of an engineering professional. Tom Bradley calculated load stresses and safety margins in real time. Jake Rivers, despite carrying the most awkward equipment, crossed the gap while maintaining casual conversation about that time in the Andes when we had to rope across a glacier crevasse. "Captain," Zorbthek whispered, "they've reached 7 kilometers. No species has ever gone beyond 7.2 kilometers, and they're showing no signs of stopping. Indeed, the humans seem to be gaining momentum rather than losing it." Their bio-readings showed elevated but stable vital signs. Their equipment remained functional. Their coordination, if anything, was improving as they developed efficient team rhythms. At 7.5 kilometers, Keth-Vranis played its cruelest card. The oxygen levels dropped to 8%, well below the threshold required to sustain most forms of complex life. The temperature fell to -40 degrees standard. The wind speed exceeded most species' structural integrity limits. The humans slowed their pace slightly and began what they called pressure breathing. They shared body heat by moving closer together during rest stops. They adjusted their route to take advantage of wind shadows and natural shelters. They kept climbing. "This is impossible," Vex-Morak announced to the monitoring station at large. "Their physiology should not support continued function at these environmental extremes. But, sir, perhaps we underestimated their adaptability." Underestimated? These were humans. Soft, weak, technologically primitive humans. They possessed no natural advantages, no enhanced capabilities, no specialized equipment beyond what any recreational enthusiast might carry. And yet, as the alien monitoring team watched in growing amazement and dread, the 4 humans continued their steady ascent toward the summit of Keth-Vranis, chatting casually about the weather, comparing the climb to previous adventures, and displaying a level of competence that challenged everything the Galactic Assessment Division thought it knew about species evaluation. The mountain threw everything it had at them. They seemed to regard each new challenge as entertainment. As the first day of their climb drew to a close, with the humans establishing a camp at the 8-kilometer mark where no being had ever survived an overnight stay, Vex-Morak found himself facing an uncomfortable possibility. What if they actually made it to the top? Captain Vex-Morak had not slept in 37 standard hours. His 4 eyes burned from staring at the monitoring displays, watching 4 humans do what the combined wisdom of the galaxy had declared impossible. Lieutenant Zorb-Thek had given up trying to provide logical explanations and now simply announced altitude milestones with the resigned tone of someone witnessing a fundamental law of physics being casually violated. "Captain, they've passed the 9-kilometer marker. 9 kilometers. The previous record holder, a genetically enhanced Titan-class warrior from the Vorak system, had managed 8.3 kilometers before his reinforced skeletal structure had literally collapsed under the atmospheric pressure variations. These humans were carrying backpacks and making jokes about the scenery. Through the drone feeds, Vex-Morak watched Emma cross paws at what appeared to be an impassable ice wall. The formation stretched upward for at least 50 meters, its surface a treacherous combination of black ice and loose rock fragments. The angle was nearly 90 degrees vertical. "Well, this is new," Emma announced, running her gloved hands along the ice surface with the casual interest of someone examining an interesting book in a library. Tom Bradley consulted his increasingly unreliable instruments. According to the geological surveys, this formation shouldn't exist. The temperature differential required to create ice of this thickness at this altitude is theoretically impossible. "Theoretically impossible seems to be this mountain's specialty," Maya observed, unpacking more climbing gear with practiced efficiency. "Remember when we climbed Mount Washington in that ice storm? The rangers said conditions were too dangerous for experienced mountaineers." Jake Rivers laughed, a sound that somehow carried warmth even through the howling wind. "Yeah, and we met that group of experienced mountaineers on their way down. They looked at us like we were insane." "To be fair," Emma replied, beginning to hammer in ice screws with methodical precision, "we probably were insane. This is definitely insane. But that's never stopped us before." Insane. Yes, that had to be the explanation. These humans were suffering from some form of altitude-induced psychosis that prevented them from recognizing danger. Except their bio-readings showed no signs of cognitive impairment. If anything, their problem-solving abilities seemed to be improving. Captain Zorb-Thek ventured, "Should we perhaps consider the possibility that our assessment protocols are inadequate?" Inadequate. The Galactic Assessment Division had been evaluating species for over 5,000 cycles. Their protocols had been tested on hundreds of different life forms across dozens of environmental extremes. The idea that 4 random humans could expose fundamental flaws in their methodology was, but actually, given what he was witnessing, it was starting to seem entirely plausible. Emma Cross had somehow found handholds in what appeared to be a perfectly smooth ice surface. She ascended with fluid grace, placing protection points and calling out route information to her companions. Maya Peterson followed, her librarian background apparently including advanced ice climbing techniques. Tom Bradley climbed while simultaneously taking readings and making calculations that seemed to predict the mountain's behavior patterns. And Jake Rivers. Jake Rivers was humming again. "Emma," Jake called up, "remember that frozen waterfall in the Adirondacks? The one where you said the ice looked friendly." "This ice definitely looks friendly," Emma replied, pulling herself over what should have been an impossible overhang. "Good crystal formation, solid anchor points. It's like the mountain wants us to climb it." "The mountain wants them to climb it." Vex-Morak's translator struggled with what appeared to be advanced human anthropomorphism. Or perhaps it was something else entirely. His species had long theorized that certain environments could influence the behavior of sentient beings, but the idea that a geological formation might actively assist climbers was, "Sir, they've reached 10 kilometers. 10 kilometers. At this altitude, the atmospheric pressure was so low that most beings required full environmental suits to maintain consciousness. The humans had switched to what they called high-altitude breathing techniques, and continued their ascent wearing nothing more than insulated clothing and basic protective gear. The mountain's weather patterns had shifted again, this time producing what the monitoring station's instruments classified as atmospheric impossibility. The storm had intensified beyond any recorded meteorological phenomenon, yet somehow the winds seemed to be pushing the humans upward rather than hindering their progress. "Is it just me?" Tom Bradley asked, consulting his tablet with an expression of scientific fascination, "or does it feel like the mountain is testing us rather than trying to kill us?" Testing them. Vex-Morak felt his respiratory system seize again. The Trial of Keth-Vranis was supposed to be a test of species worthiness, not some kind of interactive evaluation system. The mountains were geological formations, not sentient entities capable of. Captain Vex-Morak interrupted his thoughts, incoming priority communication from the Galactic Council. The holographic display materialized, showing the stern visage of High Counselor Keth-Vranis, whose species was renowned for their logical approach to all matters. "Captain Vex-Morak, we have been monitoring your assessment mission. Please explain why your test subjects have exceeded all established performance parameters." How was he supposed to explain this? "High Counselor, the humans appear to possess capabilities not documented in their species profile. They have demonstrated remarkable adaptability, problem-solving skills and physical endurance. Capabilities not documented." The High Counselor's expression shifted to what Vex-Morak recognized as barely controlled incredulity. "Captain, these are humans, primitive bipeds from a minor system. Our xenobiological experts have conducted extensive analyses. They possess no enhanced abilities." "Yes, sir. However, they are currently at 10.7 kilometers altitude on Keth-Vranis, showing no signs of distress, and appear to be enjoying themselves." The silence from the High Counselor stretched long enough for Vex-Morak to wonder if the communication system had malfunctioned. "Finally, they are enjoying themselves." "Yes, sir. One of them has been humming recreational music for most of the ascent." Through the drone feeds, they watched the humans navigate another section that should have been impossible. A field of loose scree stretched across the mountain face, each step threatening to trigger an avalanche that would sweep anything in its path into the abyss below. Previous expeditions had required specialized equipment and extreme caution to cross such terrain. The humans spread out to distribute their weight and simply walked across, maintaining casual conversation about their favorite hiking trails back on Earth. When loose rocks did shift under their feet, they adjusted their balance and kept walking as if minor avalanches were a normal part of recreational climbing. "Captain Vex-Morak," the High Counselor continued, "if these humans successfully complete the Trial of Keth-Vranis, it will require a fundamental revision of our species evaluation protocols. The implications for galactic society would be significant." Vex-Morak agreed. "Sir, permission to speak freely." "Granted. I believe we may have made an error in our understanding of what constitutes advanced capabilities. These humans do not possess enhanced strength or sensory abilities, but they demonstrate something we may have overlooked in our assessments." "Explain." Vex-Morak watched Emma Cross lead her team through another impossible section, this time a traverse across a knife-edge ridge with 1,000-meter drops on both sides. The humans moved with careful precision but no apparent fear, discussing the technical aspects of the route, as if they were analyzing a particularly interesting puzzle. They appear to possess an innate ability to adapt their expectations to match their circumstances. Rather than being intimidated by challenges, they seem to find them stimulating. Stimulating? "Yes, sir. They treat potentially fatal obstacles as problems to be solved rather than threats to be avoided. When the mountain presents them with something that should be impossible, they simply do it anyway." The High Counselor's expression suggested he was struggling with concepts that didn't fit within established frameworks. "Captain, are you suggesting that humans possess some form of reality-altering abilities?" No, sir. I believe they possess something potentially more dangerous, the inability to recognize when something is impossible. At 11 kilometers, Keth-Vranis revealed its final challenge. The summit pyramid rose before them, a near-vertical spire of ice and rock that stretched upward through cloud cover so thick that even their advanced monitoring systems couldn't penetrate it. The structure defied basic principles of geological formation. It shouldn't be able to exist. The humans studied it with the same methodical interest they'd shown every other obstacle. "Right," Emma announced, "this is going to be interesting. Tom, what do your readings show about structural integrity?" Tom Bradley had somehow managed to keep his tablet functional despite conditions that had disabled most of their monitoring equipment. Actually, the formation appears to be more stable than it looks. The ice is supporting the rock structure, and the rock is providing anchors for the ice. It's like a natural engineering marvel. Natural engineering, Maya mused, testing her equipment one final time. I wonder if this mountain has been waiting for someone who could appreciate its craftsmanship. Waiting for someone? Vex-Morak felt his worldview shifting in ways that made his sensory organs ache. The idea that a planetary formation might be capable of preference was so far outside established science that he couldn't even formulate proper objections. Captain Vex-Morak whispered, "They're going to attempt the summit pyramid." The final ascent began at dawn on their second day. Emma Cross took the lead, finding holes in what appeared to be solid ice. Maya Peterson followed, her movements efficient and confident. Tom Bradley climbed while continuing to document everything, apparently writing what looked like a scientific paper about mountain geology. Jake Rivers brought up the rear, carrying his instruments and maintaining that inexplicable humming that had somehow become the soundtrack to their impossible journey. 12 kilometers, Vex-Morak announced. No life form has ever survived at this altitude. The humans were not just surviving. They were thriving. Their bio-readings showed elevated heart rates consistent with strenuous exercise, but their coordination remained perfect, their decision-making was sound, and their teamwork had reached levels that most military units required years of training to achieve. "You know what I love about this climb?" Jake's voice carried clearly through the communication array, despite the impossible wind conditions. "It reminds me why we started doing this in the first place." "The challenge?" Maya asked. "The discovery," Emma corrected. "Finding out what we're actually capable of when we stop listening to people who tell us what's impossible." 13 kilometers. 14. The numbers on Vex-Morak's displays climbed steadily upward as the humans continued their relentless ascent. The monitoring station had fallen silent except for the periodic altitude announcements. Even the High Counselor's communication had gone quiet, apparently unable to process what they were witnessing. At 14.8 kilometers, Emma Cross pulled herself over the final ledge and stood upright on the summit of Keth-Vranis. She was followed moments later by Maya Peterson, then Tom Bradley and finally Jake Rivers, who immediately unpacked one of his instruments and began playing what sounded like a victory song. They had done it. 4 random humans had successfully completed the Trial of Keth-Vranis. They had conquered a mountain that had defeated the finest warriors, the most advanced technology, and the greatest minds of dozens of galactic civilizations. And they were celebrating by making music. "Captain," Vex-Morak's voice carried a note of something that might have been awe. "What do we do now?" Vex-Morak stared at the displays showing 4 humans on the summit of the unconquerable mountain, laughing and taking pictures like they were on some sort of recreational outing. The implications were staggering. If humans could do this, what else were they capable of? What had the galaxy been missing by dismissing them as primitive? "Now," he said slowly, "we send a very different report to the Galactic Council." The communication array crackled to life with Emma Cross's voice, clear and strong despite the impossible altitude. "Captain Vex-Morak, this is the human expedition reporting successful completion of the Trial of Keth-Vranis. Thank you for the opportunity. This was exactly the kind of challenge we needed." The kind of challenge they needed. Vex-Morak felt his entire understanding of species assessment protocols crumbling around him. These humans hadn't just completed an impossible task. They had enjoyed it. They had found it fulfilling. They were already discussing plans for their descent, as if conquering the unconquerable was simply the first item on their daily agenda. Humans, he managed to respond, congratulations on your success. Please proceed with descent operations when atmospheric conditions permit. Actually, Captain Tom Bradley's voice joined the conversation. The weather patterns are quite favorable for descent. We should be back at base camp by tomorrow afternoon. Emma's already identified an alternate route that should be faster on the way down. Faster? They wanted to go faster? Most species required days to recover from the physiological stress of high-altitude exposure. These humans were planning to jog down a mountain that had killed thousands of beings. As the monitoring team watched the humans begin their descent, moving with the casual competence of people who had just completed a pleasant weekend hike, Vex-Morak began composing his report to the Galactic Council. Subject: Reassessment of Human Species Classification. Priority: Immediate. Summary: Previous evaluations severely underestimated human capabilities. Recommend immediate recategorization and full diplomatic contact initiation. He paused, then added, additional note, suggest revision of all assessment protocols. Current methodology may be inadequate for species that treat impossibility as a starting suggestion rather than a final limitation. 18 hours later, the 4 humans walked into Base Camp Alpha looking tired but satisfied, like they'd just finished an enjoyable but strenuous workout. Emma Cross approached Vex-Morak's observation station with that same unsettling intensity he'd noticed on the first day. Captain, thank you for an excellent test. The mountain was everything we hoped it would be. Everything they hoped? Vex-Morak's translator gave up trying to process human psychology. Young human, you do realize you have just accomplished something that the greatest civilizations in the galaxy considered impossible. Emma smiled, and for the first time Vex-Morak understood that human expressions could convey ideas far more complex than his translation software could interpret. Captain, with respect, maybe the problem wasn't that the mountain was impossible. Maybe the problem was that everyone else was trying to conquer it instead of understanding it. Understanding it? Explain. The mountain wasn't fighting us, sir. It was testing us. Every challenge was designed to see if we could adapt, if we could work together, if we could keep going when things got difficult. It wasn't trying to kill us. It was trying to see what we were made of. Tom Bradley approached, still taking notes on his somehow functional tablet. Captain, would it be possible to get copies of the historical data on previous attempts? I think there might be patterns that could help other species succeed in the future. Help other species succeed. After spending 2 days proving human superiority, their first thought was how to help others achieve the same success. Vex-Morak felt his understanding of galactic politics shifting as dramatically as his understanding of species evaluation. That, he said slowly, could be arranged. Maya Peterson joined the conversation, unpacking gear with the same methodical efficiency she'd shown throughout the climb. Captain, this has been a wonderful experience. If the Galactic Council has other challenges like this, we'd be very interested in participating. Other challenges. The Trial of Keth-Vranis was supposed to be the ultimate test, the final measure of species worthiness. The idea that it was merely one challenge among many possible tests suggested a level of ambition that made Vex-Morak's respiratory system seize with something approaching panic. Jake Rivers finished packing his instruments and approached with that characteristic human grin. Captain, thanks for the hospitality. This has been the best vacation we've had in years. Vacation? They considered the Trial of Keth-Vranis a vacation. As Vex-Morak watched the 4 humans board their transport shuttle, chatting casually about their next climbing expedition and comparing the Zirian 7 experience to various mountains on their home planet, he realized that the Galactic Council was about to receive the most significant species reclassification report in recorded history. Humans weren't primitive bipeds from a minor system. They were something far more remarkable and potentially dangerous, a species that treated impossibility as entertainment, approached challenges as opportunities for growth, and considered helping others succeed more important than demonstrating their own superiority. The galaxy was about to become a very different place. 6 months later, Captain Vex-Morak received a priority communication from the Galactic Council. Humans had been granted full membership status and were being invited to participate in advanced challenge evaluations across 12 different systems. Emma Cross had been appointed as the human representative to the newly formed Extreme Environment Assessment Division. Her first official report contained a single sentence that would become legendary throughout galactic civilization. We've identified 47 previously impossible challenges that appear to be excellent training opportunities. Vex-Morak smiled, an expression his species had learned from watching humans. The galaxy had no idea what it was in for.